The officers responded out and located a deceased individual that was in a shallow grave inside of a suitcase.
A disturbing discovery has led to a shocking mystery.
Located what appeared to be a second shallow grave.
Police in Ohio have found the bodies of two young girls, both in suitcases left near a school playground. And now the hunt is on for whoever is responsible. We're on the case presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. Hey guys, real quick, it is that time of year again. It is tax time. It is stressful. Maybe you owe back taxes or have unfiled returns. Maybe you pulled money from your 401k and got hit with an unexpected bill. No matter the reason, the outcome's the same. Penalties grow, interest compounds, and you could owe again with no plan in place. The IRS is not waiting. They could enforce collections through wage garnishments or property seizures and file without your consent. But with over 15 years in business, Tax Network USA has seen it all and resolved over $1 billion in debt. No matter the amount, they help taxpayers get back on track. And they can do the same for you, but you have to call now. They're offering a free investigation call with the IRS, after which they'll put a clear plan in place for you. Don't wait for another IRS letter. Call 866-981-4548 or visit tnusa.com/LC, or you can click the link below. Imagine going on an evening walk with your dog and you go by a park that you typically do. Your dog picks up a scent. This park, by the way, is near a school. And then you find a suitcase that was partially buried in what is now being considered a shallow grave. And when you unzip that suitcase, you make the kind of discovery that lives in your mind forever.
The individuals are two juvenile black females. The one individual is suspected to be anywhere between the ages of 8.5 to 13. The second is estimated to be of the age of 10.5 to 14.
That was the Cleveland police chief giving a news conference yesterday, this video per WEWS television, and the chief laid out what police know at this point about what is truly a gruesome discovery that was made on Cleveland's east side near a school playground on Monday night. Now, police say this park, again, right near a school, is where this man who was walking his dog found a suitcase. And the man says that he was walking by this pile of dirt. He says that the dirt had been there, he believes, for a week, if not more. And his dog picks up a scent, goes over to this dirt. And when he goes over there, that's when he discovers a suitcase. And then he unzips the suitcase and he makes that horrifying discovery that he finds the body of a young girl. And that is when he says he called police. So officers arrive to this park. And shortly thereafter, as they search the park, they make a second discovery, another suitcase. And inside of that suitcase, another body, the body of another young girl. Now, this is a picture per WEWS in Cleveland of the area of the park where the body was found. Now, at this point, there's a lot that we still are working to learn about this investigation and about these young girls. But this is what police say they know about them at this point.
At this time, we don't know how long the juveniles had been at this location. It was some time, so it's not just something that was recent. The investigation is ongoing.
Now, this is a morbid point to make, but the police chief was asked about the bodies and whether or not they were dismembered. And the chief said that they were not dismembered, but they were inside of these suitcases. Right now, police don't know who the girls are. They don't know how the girls died, and they don't know who put them there. It's also unclear at this point just how long these girls had been in those suitcases in these shallow graves in this park. All the chief will say is that it appears that the girls had been there for quite some time. Now, the chief did say there does not appear to be a threat to the public right now.
I know in last night's press release, you said that the department said there's no ongoing threat to the public. What leads investigators to come to that conclusion?
When we say that, it's more, we know that this didn't just happen. We still have to develop exactly when this happened, and we don't have any indication that there's a clear threat to safety.
So this is the man who made the discovery, and he spoke to local television stations like WEWS, and in his interview, the story that he gives is he's walking his dog. This is a park that does have some residential neighborhoods nearby, and it's a park that he typically goes through, and his dog was just taking a long time after picking up a scent like dogs typically do on these walks. So to go get his dog that had run over to what he says was the fence line of the Saranac Playground, the man says that he found a suitcase that was in kind of just a pile of dirt, that it was partially covered with dirt. And again, police are calling it a shallow grave. And the man finds this suitcase and he decides that he's going to open it. Then he unzips the suitcase and he says he saw a head inside. And that's when he calls police. Now, he says that the pile of dirt, from what he can remember, because apparently he walks his dog through this park pretty regularly, had been there for roughly a week. So we'll see if that timeline fits with what law enforcement end up doing in this investigation. Police say that locally, the girls don't match any missing persons reports.
Are there missing persons, missing children that match the two girls that were found?
So it's a good question. We have checked our, locally, we have no reports of any missing children that match these identifications. We are checking statewide as well. We also have the assistance from our federal, state, and local partners. This is a priority. This is a traumatic event for our officers, for the community. And, this is just such a tragic incident. But we are trying to develop any leads we can. That's why we're also asking for the community's help.
Police say right now they are waiting on the medical examiner to come back with autopsies to try to determine the cause of death and for how long these girls were dead. Now, police would not comment on whether the girls seemed to be malnourished or if the girls were wearing clothes. The chief also remained pretty tight-lipped about the suitcases and what they looked like. Now, we can see on Google that this playground, again, it's right outside of a school, and it's not really a secluded playground because there's a sidewalk that walks right alongside it. This is inner city Cleveland on the east side. There are some neighborhoods that are nearby, and that's why you have people who will walk their dogs all the way through. And then you have to think as well with where the man says that he found this suitcase and that this pile of dirt had been there for a period of time. And from the picture that we have seen of where the body was located, it wasn't within the woods or something like that. This was right along a tree line. So you wonder just how long the bodies had been there. Now, police are looking through surveillance video. You have to hope that there's something maybe on the school that could help them in their investigation. And you have to wonder, how did those bodies get there? Was this someone who walked there on foot with two potentially heavy suitcases and then tried to make a shallow grave and then left? Or did they drive there? And did they park somewhere near this playground? And is that something that maybe a Ring doorbell camera could pick up or a traffic camera in this part of Cleveland?
Can you give any sort of update on the condition of the bodies that are found? I know you said it's been some time. This isn't something that just happened, but any sort of...
So right now, the only thing we could say, there's no clear indicators. So there's nothing that's visible enough to determine what the cause of death was.
We had heard, Chief, that perhaps these children were malnourished. Is that something that you heard as well?
I don't have a comment on that. I would defer to the medical examiner once their results come out.
Were the individuals clothed?
I will also defer to the medical examiner on that at this time.
The chief of police also cited the integrity of the investigation when talking about the size of the suitcase or what the suitcase looked like. She wouldn't say whether or not there were any sort of identifiers on the suitcase, maybe a baggage tag or something that could help them in their investigation. It's also unclear how wide the net is of the missing persons cases that the police have looked through to this point in trying to figure out who these girls are. Again, the ages that police say that these girls are, it's between 8.5 and 13 for one, 10.5 and 14 for the other. The medical examiner did say that preliminary DNA shows the girls are potentially half siblings. That's according to WKYC TV. The girls' identities, though, are still a mystery. And you might hear this story as well, and you might wonder, how could someone not realize that girls of those ages go missing? But it is important to note that sadly, there are cases where we have seen children fall through the cracks. When I saw this story, I thought about one that we have covered pretty extensively here at Law&Crime out of Connecticut, of a girl named Jacqueline Mimi Torres. She was 11 years old, and her body was found behind a vacant home in New Britain, Connecticut in October of last year. The girl was placed in a plastic storage container. Her mom, her ex-boyfriend, and Mimi's aunt are all facing charges, in connection to her murder. That story is shocking for so many reasons, but perhaps the most shocking part of it was when the medical examiner in Connecticut discovered that Mimi had been dead since late 2024, and the suspects, including her own mom, allegedly hid her body for a year, and no one seemed to notice that Mimi was missing. Mimi was never reported missing, and her mom allegedly claimed that Mimi was taken out of school to be homeschooled during the time that no one seemed to know where she was. So there wasn't a school that was able to report that Mimi was missing. Now, in this case, which does have some differences, sadly, we're talking about two bodies, not one. You have to wonder what similarities could emerge in this case. You have to wonder what could break this case wide open. And in the hours since this story first broke, how close are investigators to cracking this case? Joining us now to talk more about this case, where investigators go from here, is retired detective commander with the Chicago Police Department, Will Svilar. It's always great to have you on Law and Crime. These stories are tough, and unfortunately, we don't see them often, but there are a few that you have these cases where a body is found, and you're trying to figure out who this person is and what happened to them. 4 investigators in Cleveland, and they didn't release a lot of information other than the ages of the girls between 8.5 and 13, and then another is 10.5 and 14. Between that time frame, who they are, how they got there, we don't know. I mean, what are the first steps investigators are taking in trying to figure this out?
Who they are. You have to find out who they are. And it sounds like they said they went through the missing persons. They didn't see anybody in that age range locally. They're expanding using federal law enforcement, and I'm sure the Center for Missing and Exploited Children is probably involved. It's a little concerning to me that there is no report of a missing person. You ask yourself why somebody wouldn't report 2 little girls missing, and it goes to me as I think this is somebody that knew them, maybe who was responsible for them. And this is just speculation now, but it's just odd that they're not reported missing.
And the fact that they, according to the chief, like her words were that they had been there for some time, which is just horrific to think about. A lot is in the hands of the medical examiner at this point, trying to figure things out. What are some of the key pieces of information, if you were the detective on this case, that you would be waiting to hear that can kind of start putting you in the direction of solving this case?
Well, one of the things that I noticed from watching some of the interviews I did with the person that discovered the first suitcase was he said that he'd been walking by this fresh mound of dirt for about a week. So that kind of gets you in a timeline as an investigator that maybe this is the only thing we can point to right now, saying when this not necessarily occurred, but the first time anybody noticed this. So you go back to when that was. Again, you have evidence in the suitcase. The suitcase is evidence, but you're absolutely right. The medical examiner is going to be huge, is to determine a cause of death. You got to assume if it's a week, there's going to be a degradation of the remains. So it's going to be an interesting investigation in that you don't have a whole lot to go on right now.
No, and one thing I thought was interesting, the chief. She was asked about the suitcases that these bodies were found in, and she wouldn't really go into it. She's not giving specifics. She's not talking about even like the brand of the suitcase. Why not release that information at this point? If, and I know that there are things you want to keep close to the vest. Like, what's the strategy behind that?
I don't know why you wouldn't release that unless you just don't know yet. Unless there was no manufacturer's tag or they haven't identified it yet. Or it could be something as basic as, maybe there was a luggage tag on this suitcase, on one of the suitcases. Maybe they have a little something they don't want to let out there yet. But again, when you talk about that, now they give the release saying that there's no danger to the community. There's a reason why they say that. Her explanation was, it's just to say that it didn't just happen and, we don't think there's an immediate threat. Maybe they have more than they're saying.
Yeah. And in so many cases, we know that authorities maybe release 10% of what they actually know at this point. It does seem that there's a lot of questions unanswered here. When it comes to the missing persons part of it, because we have seen cases, and sadly with children, where there's one in Connecticut that I've covered recently of a girl named Jacqueline Torres, and she had been dead for a year, and her body was found behind a vacant building in New Britain in October of last year. And her mom had said, she was pulled out of school, for homeschooling allegedly. And then sadly, no one ever followed up with where is this girl until her body was found. Like, and I'm just bringing that up because as shocking as this case is, like there are other examples of it. Like when it comes to like missing persons reports of children in cases like this, how often are these kids actually reported as people who are missing?
When you talk about abductions, somebody abducted from the street who unfortunately turns out, found deceased, murdered, you get those are reported. The ones that don't get reported are the ones where there's a family member involved, or, in a lot of cases we get malnourishment, neglect, the kids die from malnourishment or something like that. And then they just dispose of the remains any way they can because they think they're going to get in trouble. Those are the ones that you see that are not reported. The abductions are almost always reported.
Yeah, because with that, I think of, going back to the Torres case or some of the other ones where it might be one child who falls through the cracks, and that's not okay. And it's shocking every time it happens. But for there to be, just what stands out to you that we have two girls, and these are not babies. These are people, you think between 8.5 and 13, between 10.5 and 14. These are elementary to almost high school age, middle school girls where you think they would have friends, they would have people that they knew. Like when you think of that age range that we're talking about at this point, like where are some of the clues that can come out of that?
Well, like you said, there's a social circle. Especially now with the social media, there's a social circle for kids in that age range, unless they were kept, secreted, they were kept, inside the home. The more I think about this, the more I think this is going to be something where we're going to find out that this is an abuse and this is a neglect situation. And I would be very shocked if these girls weren't related. There's always the outside thing that there's a serial killer operating in the area, but that would go to an abduction where you might get, a report of somebody being missing. My gut feeling on this is going to be a family thing. And I hate to say that, but that's what my gut feeling is.
Yeah, no, and it makes sense. At this point is we don't know a lot and we're still waiting for a lot of information. How can, at this point too, typically, what are you going off of? Like, those are very specific age ranges that the chief, like 8.5 to 13, 10.5 to 14. Like, how do you get to that range in figuring this out?
Well, it goes, it goes to the science. It goes to the measurement of, certain bones that are there. You see development in the child between this age and this age. This bone should be this long. When you're getting to the 14-year-old range, you talk about the bodies are changing, and that's how, in my experience, that the medical examiners and forensic investigators, that's how they determine age is by the size of the bones, development of the skull, things like that.
This is a morbid question, but it was a piece of information that came out in the news conference. And a reporter had asked, were the bodies dismembered? And that's, it's just hard to think about, but that's the reality in some of these cases. The fact that they weren't, is there anything you can pull away from that piece of information?
Yeah, they were small enough to put in suitcases. An 8.5 or a 10.5 to a 14-year-old. That's why, I go back to the thought that these are probably possibly malnourished kids who were abused, that were small for their age, but small enough to put in a suitcase. So that's what strikes me as odd, and it kind of points me in that direction as far as why the kids are not dismembered and why they're in suitcases, because they're small.
And this is for those of us on the outside, especially just with Nancy Guthrie being in the news, and there's so much talk about DNA recently. Like when you have children that young, like, is there anything DNA related that you can do to try and identify who they are?
Yes. You obviously take DNA, you do a profile. Now you can compare the DNA from the remains of the two children and see if there is familial DNA there. You can say if there's a mother and a father in common with those children. And then, you run the familial DNA into the database, into CODIS. But if either one of the parents aren't in CODIS, you're not really going to get a hit. But you're going to do a direct comparison between the two.
When it comes to the suitcase part of it as well, so this was a lot, East Cleveland, it's near a school. Residential homes are in the area, but it is, it's unclear if there are any video cameras that are pointed directly at this park. But I also think of like, if you're carrying two suitcases, that would be relatively heavy. Like that's going to, it's not like you're just passing by on a run. Like there's something that you had to use to get to that point, or you probably made a bit of a scene carrying 2 suitcases randomly down this area potentially. Like, what are some of the things police officers are looking at, like on the trail of like, how did this person, whoever they are, how they got to that point?
You're absolutely right that they were transported in a vehicle of some kind. And you're not going to park at the curb and walk 2 suitcases to the tree line, dig 2 holes and put the body in, to put the suitcases in the hole. I got to believe they pulled up on the grass. So you may have some evidence, tire tracks, things of that nature. But again, you dug 2 holes pretty quick, because how much time are you going to spend out there on a tree line, not back into the woods, but close enough to where somebody walking their dog sees this, over the course of a week, saying, "Hey, something's not right here." Those bodies were transported in a vehicle, and that vehicle was there for a minute. So, you got to, again, we talk about this all the time when we talk about these cases. Video surveillance. It's near a school. There's cameras on a school. Stoplight cameras, red light cameras. I don't know if they have them in Cleveland, but we have them here in Chicago, quite a few of them. Ring doorbells, anything you can find, you're canvassing, and you're trying to find that video evidence. Routes in and out to that area. What's the route that gets you to where that are the road that's the closest to where the suitcases were found. You have to backtrack on all that. It's a very extensive investigation. But I think you got to find out who these girls are. If you find out who, a lot of time you find out why.
Yeah. And there has to be someone, whoever did this, that is now seeing this story get a ton of attention. And that potentially, I'm sure, impacts the way that they act. Maybe there's someone who sees this person as like, well, this person's been odd. Maybe they had, girls, young girls or family members, whatever it may be. And like that can help crack this case. I also think of like where they were found, like where this was someone who was just kind of evening walk on a Monday night with their dog. The dog picked up some sort of scent. He did talk about having seen this, pile of dirt. So it's not like it was in a secluded area. Is there anything you can take away from that where it was visible to just a regular person passing by on a Monday evening walk? And then, then it does lead to that second body that police say that they found. But just the fact that it doesn't seem like this was as well hidden as maybe this person thought it would be.
Well, this is someone trying to dispose of what they have quickly. They're trying to take the least amount of time possible in that area, to draw attention to themselves. So they're not dragging it back into the woods. They're getting the suitcases out, they're digging the small holes, and they're getting out of there. Like you said, I mean, it's visible for somebody walking their dog. And you made a good point about the dog picking up a scent. He said that he saw that pile of dirt about a week ago. Not to be morbid, not to be gruesome, but the scent is going to become stronger as the days pass.
And that's for this is also just not a question from someone who knows about these investigations or have been part of them, but like, you don't need a trained canine to pick up something like this. Like, I don't know what type of dog it was, but this, assuming it's like any sort of regular pet that someone would have, like even that type of dog can make this kind of discovery.
Not just the dogs, but just animals in the wild, coyotes, raccoons, animals in the wild will pick up on that scent as well. And again, the stronger it gets, the more a human can pick up on that scent. And believe me, once you smell that smell, you'll never forget it.
Yeah, no. And just a horrific discovery in Cleveland. And at the time we're recording this, which is Wednesday morning, hopefully as people watch this, as it goes up, more information will come up and police can solve this case out of there. Will Spielar, it's always great to have you on Law&Crime. I know also a thing I want to talk about is a show that you're going to be part of. We're recording this here on Wednesday, March 4th. So, but a story that you were part of, case you were part of, it's called Hunt for the Missing Chicago. What can you tell us about it?
Well, this is a story, two of my good friends and detectives I used to work with, Pam Childs and Joe Struck, are part of an investigation into the missing person of a postal worker named Kiara Coles. She's been gone over 5 years now. It's a very interesting story with a lot of twists. There's a person of interest. There's possibly a love triangle. It's an interesting story, and that's on tonight on ID.
Yeah,
at 9:00 Central.
9:00 Central. Really important story. going to be cool to see one of the cases that you worked on, because so many people who watch Law&Crime see you and offer great analysis on cases like we're talking here out of Cleveland. Retired detective commander with the Chicago Police Department, Will Svilar. It's always great to have you on Law&Crime. Thanks for being with us and talking about this case with us.
Thanks, Chris.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law&Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify, and we're also now streaming on Peacock. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.